We will talk about developing countries. First, I will mention the environment of developing countries. In the process for current developed countries to grow, there was industrial revolution and countries' progress involving a great deal of environmental sacrifice. Recently, the environmental problems are often taken up in the world, and some rules like Kyoto Protocols were established. However, some big countries like America did not ratify the Kyoto Protocol. They got out of responsibility for working on environmental problems. Developing countries suffer from a large part of damage from global warming. There are two ways to solve these problems: support from developed countries and stipulation of a concrete measure. Global warming is progressing. The amount of emission of developed countries are restricted, but this regulation is not applied to developing countries. Also, the amount of greenhouse gas of America is a fourth of greenhouse gas which is discharged in the world. America did not ratify Kyoto Protocol. America is the country which should take responsibility, but there is no intention of a cut of the emission of greenhouse gas. If this situation continues, global warming is progressing rapidly and damage such as sea level rise is caused. It is said that developing countries are at risk of a large part of damage from global warming, because the infrastructure in developing countries is old and useless. People who live along the sea or in low land and are especially fraught with danger. Global warming has caused some problems, so the solution to make the speed slow is necessary. First, developed countries should support the growth of developing countries without increasing greenhouse gas. Some people may say that developed countries emitted greenhouse gas, so developing countries have the right that they grow up without keeping down greenhouse gas. However, global warming will also affect developing countries, so an effort to cut the amount of gas is needed for both sides. Developing countries do not have skills to decrease greenhouse gas, so it is necessary for developed ones to support developing ones by money or skills. Rich countries are committed to provide $100 billion to developing countries by 2020. Second, not only protocol but also concrete measures should be progressed. There is a protocol such as the one made in Kyoto, but this has hardly any effect. For example, Japan took part in Kyoto Protocol, but the amount of greenhouse gas has increased every year. The two biggest countries, which are the United States and China, churned out more than enough extra greenhouse gas to erase all the reduction made by other countries during the Kyoto period. It is clear that effective measures were not taken, so each country should consider the effective measures and make an effort to decrease the amount of a greenhouse gas.
Next, I'm going to tell you about starvation. Starvation cannot keep body healthy because of lack of nutrition, especially food. And this situation exists particularly in developing countries. The most serious problem about starvation is that many children cannot eat enough food, so they cannot grow up healthy. What is worse, they die in childhood. According to World Food Program, currently people who are suffered from starvation are about 795 million people worldwide. In other words, 1 out of 9 people in the world cannot access enough food. On the other hand, a lot of food such as leftovers are thrown away every day in Japan. So imagine this situation is difficult for Japanese people. However, starvation exists in the reality certainty. To solve the problem of starvation, Japan should make efforts to decrease leftovers and allocate more food for the countries which suffered from starvation, and decreasing food imports to allocate more food for the European countries which lack of food. To do this, establishing organizations whose aims at decreasing leftovers and helping people through a lack of food is needed. If such organizations are realized for well, the people who are suffered from starvation will decrease, and what is more, leftovers of Japan will decrease. This means Japan can combat wasting of food by decreasing starvation. In addition to this, if Japanese success by the activities of such organization, Japan will be good sample as a great country which can decrease not only starvation in poor countries, but also leftovers in Japan. This should be called win-win relationship, because not only Japan, but also poor countries will have merit. Moreover, if other developed countries such as US, China, Russia, and so on mimic this Japanese activity, starvation may be banished completely. Solving the problem of starvation is not easy, but making an effort for this is so important to improve the situation of starvation in poor countries as a first step. And establishing organizations whose aims at decreasing leftovers and helping people through a lack of food is needed so strongly. By doing so, the world will be much better, and the people who have suffered from starvation will become the things of the past in the future.
Then we would like to introduce the project which is underway all over the world. In 2050, the world's governments came together to agree 70 ambitious development goals, which promise to overcome a vast array of problems by 2030. The Sustainable Development Goals, otherwise known as the Global Goals, are a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. These 70 goals build on the successes of the Millennium Development Goals, while including new areas such as climate change, economic inequality, innovation, sustainable consumption, peace and justice, among other priorities. The goals are interconnected. Often the key to success on one will involve tracking issues are commonly associated with another. The SDGs came into effect in January 2060, and they will continue to guide UNDP policy and funding until 2030. As the lead UN Development Agency, UNDP is uniquely placed to help implement the goals through our work in some 170 countries and territories. Our strategic plan focuses on key areas, including poverty alleviation, democratic governance and peace building, climate change and disaster risk, and economic inequality. UNDP provides support to governments to integrate the SDGs into their national development plans and policies. This work is already underway as we support many countries in accelerating progress already achieved under the Millennium Development Goals. Achieving the SDGs requires the partnership of governments, private sector, civil society, and citizens alike to make sure we leave a better planet for future generations.